The stars look different from here. Captain James Reed stood at the main viewport of the Earth exploration vessel Pioneer watching as the massive space station grew larger against the backdrop of an unfamiliar nebula. After decades of preparation, humanity had finally achieved reliable faster-than-light travel, and now they were about to meet the galactic community. "Nervous, Captain?" asked Tom, the ship's pilot, not taking his eyes off the approach controls. "Not nervous, just ready," Reed replied, straightening his uniform. The truth was more complicated. Every human on board carried the weight of Earth's future on their shoulders. The Pioneer docked with a soft thud. Reed led his team of 12 scientists, diplomats, and security personnel through the airlock. They were greeted by a delegation of beings so diverse that Reed's mind struggled to process what he was seeing. Tall, willowy creatures with 4 arms stood next to stocky beings covered in iridescent scales. Floating orbs of light pulsed in what might have been conversation with humanoids whose skin shifted colors like living chameleons. At the front stood a being that looked almost like a statue carved from blue granite. It wore an ornate metal harness that gleamed under the station's lights. "I am Ambassador Trell of the Vorn Empire, representing the Galactic Union Council," the being said, its voice surprisingly smooth. "We welcome Earth to the greater community of space-faring species." Reed stepped forward. "Captain James Reed of Earth, we come with peaceful intentions and hopes for friendship and mutual growth." The formal introductions continued as they walked through corridors filled with technology that made Earth's most advanced systems look like children's toys. Reed noticed the looks, the subtle ways the various aliens assessed the humans. He recognized that expression. It was the same one people use when looking at something primitive, something lesser. In the Grand Council chamber, representatives from dozens of civilizations watched as Reed presented Earth's achievements and aspirations. He spoke of humanity's rapid technological advancement, their resilience in the face of challenges, and their desire to be valuable members of the galactic community. When he finished, Ambassador Trell stood. "The Council has reviewed the data on human civilization. Your biology is interesting. You lack significant physical advantages. No natural armor, modest strength, limited sensory capacity. Your technology, while advancing quickly, remains several generations behind Union standards." Reed kept his expression neutral as Trell continued. "Your species shows concerning tendencies toward emotional decision-making and internal conflict. Your planet's history is marked by warfare over resources that could have been shared. These patterns suggest fundamental instabilities." A murmur rippled through the council chamber. Reed felt his face grow warm, but maintained his diplomatic composure. "However," Trell said, "all species begin somewhere. The Council hereby classifies Earth as a Category 3 civilization, permitted limited trade routes and cultural exchange, but restricted from accessing advanced technology or participating in Union governance until such time as humans demonstrate greater maturity." The classification fell like a stone in Reed's stomach. Category 3, the designation for species considered too underdeveloped to be taken seriously. "Ambassador," Reed said carefully, "we understand we have much to learn, but we believe humanity has unique perspectives to offer. Our adaptability and creative problem-solving." "All young species believe they are special, Captain," Trell interrupted. "The Union has existed for 12,000 years. We have seen many civilizations like yours. Some advance to become valuable members. Others do not. Time will tell which path humans will take." 3 days later, the Pioneer departed the station with limited trade agreements and a stack of regulations about where human ships could travel and what they could do. Back on Earth, the news of humanity's classification spread quickly. In a secure conference room, Reed faced the United Nations Security Council. "So they think we're weak," said General Miller, his face grim. "They think we're young," Dr. Emily Carter corrected. The scientist had been analyzing the data provided by the Union. And perhaps we are, by their standards. But they're wrong to dismiss us. Reed nodded. Then we'll just have to show them what humans can do. 5 years passed quickly. The small human colony on planet Novo had grown from a handful of prefab shelters to a bustling settlement of 2,000 people. Unlike the gleaming cities of the more advanced Union worlds, Novo was built with practical simplicity, structures of local stone and earth metals, with gardens everywhere. Mark Wilson wiped sweat from his forehead as he examined the broken alien device on his workbench. Before joining the colony, he had been a military engineer on Earth. Now he ran what the locals called the Fix-It Shop, a place where passing traders brought their broken technology. "Can you repair it?" asked the merchant, a tall, spindly alien with pale green skin. The device was a standard Union food processor designed to make any organic matter edible for most species. "Already fixed it," Mark said, pressing a button. The machine hummed to life. "Your power converter was bad, but I replaced it with one from an old Earth microwave, with some modifications." The merchant's large eyes blinked rapidly. "But that is not the correct part." "Works though, doesn't it?" Mark smiled. "And it'll last longer than the original." "That'll be 4 trade credits." As the merchant left, Dr. Emily Carter entered the shop. In the years since first contact, she had become the leading human expert on alien biology, running a research station on the other side of the colony. "Mark, I need your help with something," she said, placing a data tablet on his bench. "I've been studying the genetic patterns of Union species, and I'm seeing something strange." Mark looked at the complex diagrams and shrugged. "I fix machines, not genes." "But you see patterns nobody else does," Emily insisted. "Look at these DNA sequences from 12 different species. Do you notice anything?" Mark studied the screen, his engineer's mind looking for structure in the chaos. After a moment, he pointed to several sections. "These repeat. Different species, same pattern. Like they share the same. I don't know, programming." Emily nodded excitedly. "Exactly. The Union's evolutionary theory says these species developed independently, but this suggests they're connected somehow, maybe even engineered by the same creator." Their conversation was interrupted by the colony's alert system. A Union diplomatic shuttle was approaching for an unscheduled landing. At the landing pad, Colony Administrator Jane Porter greeted Ambassador Trell, who had not visited human territory since the initial classification 5 years earlier. The Vorn ambassador looked around the modest human settlement with what appeared to be distaste. "Your agricultural methods are unusual," Trell commented as they walked past gardens where earth plants grew alongside alien vegetation. "But effective," Jane replied. "We're producing food that's compatible with 8 different Union species now. Our exports have tripled this year." "Yes, your trade reports were noted," Trell said without enthusiasm. "I am here about the territorial dispute with the Meta system. Their colony on the moon of Pax 4 has filed a complaint about human mining operations in their asteroid belt." Jane frowned. "We have legal claims to those resources. The asteroids are closer to our colony than theirs. The Council has reviewed the situation," Trell said, handing her an official document. "The mining rights have been awarded to the Meta. Human operations must cease within 30 days. Later that evening, Jane met with the colony's leadership council, including Mark and Emily. "It's not fair," Mark said angrily. "Those are our asteroids. We need those minerals." "Fair doesn't matter," Emily replied quietly. "They still see us as the new kids, easy to push around." Jane studied the Union document. "They think we'll just accept whatever they decide. But maybe there's another way." Mark leaned forward. "What if we could process lower-grade ore that the Meta don't want? I've been working on a new extraction method, less efficient by Union standards, but it works on material they consider waste." Jane smiled slowly. "So we take what they throw away and make something valuable from it. Very human of us." Emily looked out the window at the stars. "That's how we'll survive out here. Not by playing their game, but by changing the rules. They think our adaptability is our weakness. They don't understand. It's our greatest strength. Outside the window, a Union ship passed overhead, its lights bright against the night sky. Below in the human colony, work continued through the darkness. While the galaxy might not respect them yet, humans were quietly carving their place among the stars, one creative solution at a time. The emergency alert woke Dr. Emily Carter from a deep sleep. Her communication device pulsed with an urgent message from the Union Science Division, a courtesy notification sent to all registered researchers. Emily blinked the sleep from her eyes and read the message twice to make sure she understood. Something was happening at the edge of the galaxy. Union scientists called it the void, a growing area of space where normal physics seemed to break down. Communications failed. Energy systems stopped working. Ships disappeared. Emily pulled up the attached data and studied the readings. The void wasn't just strange, it was expanding. According to Union projections, it would reach populated systems within months. By morning, the entire Novo colony was buzzing with the news. In the colony's meeting hall, Administrator Jane Porter tried to maintain order as worried colonists shouted questions. "The Union Military Council has assured us they have the situation under control," Jane said, though her voice lacked conviction. 3 battle fleets have been dispatched to investigate and contain this phenomenon. Mark Wilson, sitting in the back row, raised his hand. "Has anyone considered that maybe fighting it isn't the answer? If it absorbs energy, won't energy weapons just make it stronger?" From the speaker system, Ambassador Trell's voice cut through the room. The Vorn diplomat was addressing all Union worlds simultaneously. "This threat will be eliminated through the superior firepower of the Union forces," Trell declared. "The Vorn Empire has committed its most advanced warships to this cause. All civilians should continue normal operations and avoid unnecessary travel near the affected sectors." 2 weeks later, the news arrived. The First Fleet had vanished completely. The Second and Third suffered massive losses before retreating. In her lab, Emily worked day and night analyzing the limited data available on the void. Something about its energy signature seemed familiar. She compared it to theoretical models of space-time distortions she had studied on Earth years ago. "It's not destroying things," she muttered to herself. "It's changing them, converting matter and energy into something new." Her research was interrupted when Mark burst into the lab, his face flushed with excitement. "You need to see this," he said, setting down a small device on her desk. "A Union scout ship nearly got swallowed by the void. I salvaged its data core before the Union officials could get to it." Emily connected the damaged device to her computer. Most of the data was corrupted, but some sensor readings remained intact. What she saw confirmed her suspicions. "Mark, this is incredible," she said. "The void isn't just a natural disaster. It's behaving like an organized system, almost like it has intelligence." Mark frowned. "You think it's alive, or created by something that is," Emily replied. "And look at this pattern. The way it processes energy. It's restructuring reality at the quantum level." Before they could discuss further, the colony's alarms sounded again. Outside, people rushed toward the communications center where emergency broadcasts were playing. The void had accelerated its expansion. 3 populated systems had gone dark overnight. The Union was ordering evacuations of frontier worlds, including several neighboring human colonies. Admiral James Reed, who had been promoted years after his first contact mission, appeared on the broadcast. His face looked older, more weathered than Emily remembered. "The Union Military Council has implemented emergency protocols," Reed announced. "All civilian vessels are being commandeered for evacuation efforts. Earth has committed our entire fleet to assist." The camera shifted to show Ambassador Trell. The Vorn looked shaken, something Emily had never seen before. "The Military Council maintains that this threat can be contained," Trell said stiffly. "Advanced weapon systems are being deployed. Civilian panic serves no purpose." That night, Emily sent her research findings to Admiral Reed directly, bypassing normal Union channels. Her message was simple. The void couldn't be fought with conventional weapons. It absorbed and transformed energy. The more power thrown at it, the faster it grew. Reed's reply came hours later. Just 3 words. They won't listen. From the colony's observation point, Emily watched as more Union warships passed overhead, heading toward the edge of the galaxy. The night sky was filled with the glow of engines as refugees moved in the opposite direction. They're still trying to fight it, Mark said, standing beside her. They don't understand what they're dealing with. Emily nodded. They will. Soon, they won't have a choice. Admiral Reed stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Defiant Asterisk, watching the stream of refugee ships fleeing from the advancing void. 3 months had passed since the first reports, and the situation had grown desperate. The void now consumed entire star systems weekly. Billions of displaced beings crowded the remaining safe worlds. "Sir, we're receiving a priority transmission from Union Central," his communications officer said. Reed nodded tiredly. "Put it through." The stern face of Trell appeared on the main screen. The Vorn diplomat had been appointed director of Union Security, giving him nearly unlimited power during the crisis. "Admiral Reed," Trell said, his voice colder than usual. "Your fleet has been reassigned. You will escort these refugee vessels to Sector 12, then return to Union Central." Reed frowned. "Director, Sector 12 is already over capacity. These people need—" "These are direct orders," Trell interrupted. "The crisis requires a unified response under centralized command. The Vorn fleet has deployed our newest weapons system against the void. We expect significant progress shortly." The transmission ended before Reed could respond. He turned to his second-in-command. "Any word from Dr. Carter?" "Her latest message arrived an hour ago," the officer replied, handing Reed a datapad. "She says it's urgent." Reed quickly read Emily's report. Her team had analyzed the patterns of the void's expansion and found something unexpected. It wasn't random. The void spread faster toward regions with higher energy outputs, particularly the kind of energy produced by the Union's advanced weapons. "Set course for Novo Colony," Reed ordered. "We need to speak with Dr. Carter directly." "Sir, that contradicts Director Trell's orders." Reed's jaw tightened. "Log it as a necessary detour to assist additional refugees. I'll take responsibility." 2 days later, Reed sat in Emily's lab as she explained her theory. "The void is responding to stimuli," she said, pointing to her data models. "Every time they attack it with energy weapons, it grows stronger and more directed. Look at the pattern. It's heading straight for the highest concentrations of energy technology in the galaxy." "The Vorn homeworld," Reed murmured. "Exactly. And they keep firing more powerful weapons at it, making everything worse." Reed paced the small lab. "I need to present this to the Union Council immediately. We need to change strategy." What followed was the most tense council meeting in Union history. Representatives from 100 species gathered virtually as the crisis threatened their existence. Reed presented Emily's findings, arguing passionately for a change in approach. "The void isn't an enemy we can defeat through firepower," he explained. "It's a phenomenon we need to understand. Dr. Carter's research suggests it might be sentient, or at least responsive. We need to—" "This is human nonsense," Trell interrupted, his stone-like face showing rare emotion. "Your species always seeks to empathize with threats rather than eliminate them. The Vorn have developed a quantum disruptor that will neutralize this anomaly at its source." Several council members nodded in agreement. The Vorn had been the military backbone of the Union for millennia. Their technological supremacy was rarely questioned. "Director Trell," Reed said carefully, "every weapon you've deployed has accelerated the void's growth. Dr. Carter's data conclusively shows." "Enough." Trell's voice echoed through the chamber. "The Council has heard your primitive theories. Admiral Reed, your emotional attachment to these human researchers clouds your judgment. You are relieved of your command, effective immediately. All human vessels are restricted to Earth's solar system until further notice. The meeting ended with Reed effectively court-martialed. As he prepared to return to Earth in disgrace, news arrived that sent shockwaves through the galaxy. 3 core Union systems had gone dark simultaneously, including one of the Vorn's major colony worlds. The quantum disruptor had catastrophically failed, creating a surge in the Void's expansion rate. Reed received an urgent, private message that night. It wasn't from a Union Council or from Earth Command. It was from a junior Union diplomat named Krell, who had worked closely with humans for years. Admiral Reed. The message read, "I believe Dr. Carter is right. A small group of us are prepared to provide resources for a human-led initiative to address the Void. The Vorn approach has failed. We need a different way. Can we meet?" Reed looked out the viewport at the stars. Everything was changing. The rigid hierarchy that had kept humans at the bottom was crumbling in the face of extinction. "Tell Krell yes," Reed told his aide. "It's time for a new approach." The hidden moon base wasn't much to look at. Hastily constructed from salvaged parts and outdated equipment, it orbited an uninhabited gas giant far from the usual trade routes. But to Dr. Emily Carter, it represented humanity's best hope. The equipment delivery from Krell just arrived, Mark Wilson announced as he entered the main lab. Since being officially condemned by the Union, their research team had operated in secret, funded by a coalition of species desperate enough to try anything. Emily looked up from her workstation, where holographic models of the Void pulsed and shifted. "Did they send everything we asked for?" "Most of it." Mark set down a crate of components. "Though I still don't understand why you wanted these ancient radio transmitters. This technology is centuries out of date." Emily smiled. "That's exactly why we need them. The Void disrupts advanced energy systems, but simple electrical and mechanical devices seem resistant. It's like the difference between a complex computer virus and a hammer." For 3 weeks, their team of human scientists and engineers had worked around the clock. While the official Union forces continued their failing military campaign, Emily's group took a different approach, studying the Void as if it were an ecosystem rather than an enemy. "The retrofit on the scout ship is complete," Mark said, handing Emily a tablet with the specs. "We replaced the energy shields with a mechanical hull reinforcement. No quantum drives, no beam weapons, just chemical rockets and analog controls." Emily nodded approvingly. "Perfect. The simpler, the better. It's practically prehistoric technology," Mark said. "The Vorn would be horrified." "The Vorn are running out of warships," Emily replied soberly. 3 more systems went dark yesterday. The Void is accelerating toward their homeworld. The scout ship, renamed Curiosity *, was piloted by Tom, the same man who had flown the first human ship to the Union Council years ago. His mission now was far more dangerous: to approach the edge of the Void and deploy Emily's specially designed sensors. From the command center, Emily and her team monitored the mission. The atmosphere was tense as Curiosity neared the boundary where reality itself seemed to warp and change. "I'm at the perimeter." Tom's voice crackled through the speakers, distorted but still understandable. "Advanced systems failing as expected. Switching to backup controls now." Emily leaned forward. "Deploy the sensors, Tom. Then get out of there." "Deploying now." There was a pause. "Wait, something's happening. The Void is. It's reacting to the sensors. Not consuming them, but interacting." Data began streaming into the lab's computers, data unlike anything they had seen before. Emily stared at the readings in wonder. "It's not destroying," she whispered. "It's transforming, creating something new." For the next 3 days, Emily barely slept as she analyzed the sensor data. When Admiral Reed arrived at the moon base with representatives from Krell's coalition, she was ready to present her findings. "The Void isn't our enemy," she explained to the gathered officials. "It's a natural evolutionary process in the universe, like a caterpillar transforming into a butterfly. Space itself is changing state. That doesn't help the billions who have lost their homes, said one of the alien representatives. But it changes our approach, Reed countered. If we can't stop it, maybe we can adapt to it. Emily nodded. Exactly. Advanced energy technology fails within the void, but simpler systems can survive. We don't need to fight it. We need to learn to live with it. She displayed a new model showing the void's projected path. We have time to evacuate the most threatened systems if we act now. Mark has developed retrofits for standard Union ships, replacing advanced systems with simpler alternatives that can function near the boundary. As the meeting progressed, news arrived that shocked everyone. A major Union hub world faced imminent engulfment by the void. The official evacuation fleet, composed of the most advanced vessels in the Union, had suffered catastrophic system failures as they approached the affected zone. Millions will die if they can't be evacuated, Krell said, his usually calm voice trembling. Reed straightened his shoulders. Not if we can help it. We have 20 ships retrofitted with Mark's modifications. They're not pretty, they're not fast, but they'll work where Union technology fails. They won't be enough, one of the officials said. Then we'll build more, Emily replied. Humans are good at working with limited resources. It's what we've always done. For the first time since the crisis began, a hint of hope entered the room. The galaxy's dismissal of human primitive technology had become their greatest oversight. And now, potentially, their salvation. The Union Council chamber had never been so crowded or so quiet. Representatives from every surviving species stood shoulder to shoulder, their usual formality forgotten in the face of disaster. At the center of the room, Director Trell faced Admiral Reed across the speaking platform. The Vorn Empire formally requests Earth's assistance, Trell said, each word clearly painful for him to speak. His blue stone-like skin seemed duller than before, cracked in places from stress. The situation has exceeded our projections. Reed maintained a neutral expression, though inside he felt a complex mix of vindication and sympathy. Earth is prepared to help, Director. But we have conditions. A murmur rippled through the gathered representatives. No Category 3 civilization had ever dared to place conditions on the mighty Vorn. Name them, Trell said stiffly. Full Union membership for Earth, effective immediately. Complete access to all data regarding the void. And direct control of the evacuation and research efforts under Dr. Emily Carter's leadership. Trell's eyes narrowed. For a moment, the old pride flickered there. Then he looked at the emergency displays, showing the void's unstoppable advance toward the Vorn homeworld, and his resistance crumbled. Agreed, he said simply. Within hours, Earth's status was officially upgraded. Human ships, retrofitted with simplified technology that could function near the void, began evacuation operations in systems where Union vessels had failed. Mark Wilson led teams of engineers teaching Union species how to modify their advanced technology into more resilient forms. In a vast conference hall on one of the few remaining Union hub worlds, Dr. Emily Carter presented her complete findings to the assembled Science Council. The room was packed with the greatest scientific minds of 100 species, all listening intently to the human they had once dismissed. The void isn't destroying our universe, Emily explained, pointing to her data models. It's evolving it. Think of it as a caterpillar transforming into a butterfly. The process looks like destruction if you're living on the caterpillar, but it's actually creating something new. Can it be stopped? Asked an elderly scientist from one of the oldest Union species. I don't believe so, Emily replied honestly. Not any more than we could stop a star from going supernova. But we might be able to communicate with it, to coexist with it. Her proposal was radical. Establish contact with whatever intelligence existed within the void using simplified communication methods based on basic physical principles rather than advanced technology. She showed plans for a special probe designed by her team, a device using mechanical systems and analog signals that could potentially survive deep inside the void's boundary. While the scientists debated Emily's theories, Mark Wilson worked with Union engineers on a massive retrofit project. In orbital shipyards around multiple worlds, once gleaming vessels of the most advanced design were stripped down and rebuilt with what the Vorn considered primitive technology. Many Union warriors were horrified to see their elegant energy weapons replaced with chemical propellants and physical projectiles. "This is a regression of 1,000 years," complained one Vorn commander as Mark installed a manual control system in his flagship. "Sometimes you need to take a step back to move forward," Mark replied calmly. "Your ancestors survived and thrived before they had quantum cannons. The principles still work." Admiral Reed coordinated the largest evacuation in galactic history. Billions of beings needed transport to safe zones that Emily's team had identified, regions projected to remain stable for at least several years. The logistics were overwhelming, but Reed approached the problem with methodical human persistence. During one critical mission to a system on the verge of being engulfed, Reed's flagship suffered severe damage and began drifting toward the void boundary. Instead of abandoning ship, Reed ordered a controlled approach. "Get me as close as our instruments can function," he commanded. "If we're going to lose this ship anyway, let's gather data that might save others." For 17 terrifying minutes, the Defiant skimmed the edge of the void, collecting readings no Union vessel had survived to record. When emergency thrusters finally pulled them back to safer space, Reed's crew discovered their admiral unconscious at his post, blood trickling from his ears and nose from the strain. The data they gathered, however, proved invaluable. It revealed patterns in the void structure that Emily's team used to refine their understanding of the phenomenon and to finalize the design of their communication probe. When Reed regained consciousness in a medical facility days later, he found Director Trull standing by his bed. "That was either extremely brave or extremely foolish," the Vorn said quietly. Reed managed a weak smile. "Humans are often both." Trull's expression remained serious. Perhaps we misjudged your species." 10 years had passed since the first appearance of the void. The galaxy was transformed, not just by the void itself, but by how species had adapted to survive it. Dr. Emily Carter stood at the observation window of the new research station. Unlike the gleaming technological marvels that the Union had once built, this facility was a blend of simplicity and function. Through the reinforced glass, she could see the shimmering boundary where normal space met the void. It was beautiful in its way, rippling curtains of energy in colors humans had no names for. The door slid open behind her, and Mark Wilson entered. The years had added gray to his hair, but his eyes still held the same practical energy. "The last settlement zone is stable," he reported. "The boundary barriers are holding. We've got another 100,000 refugees coming in next week." Emily nodded. After years of trial and error, they had discovered how to create transition zones along the void's edge, places where life could continue as reality itself gradually changed. These settlements used hybrid technology that could function in both states of existence. "Any word from the deep probe?" she asked. "Still transmitting. The mechanical systems are working perfectly." Mark's greatest achievement had been designing machines that could survive deep within the void, using principles so basic they functioned under both sets of physics. The communication probe had been their breakthrough. After hundreds of failed attempts, they had finally established contact with what existed within the void, not an enemy, but a process, a natural evolution of the universe itself. The intelligence they found was alien beyond comprehension, but through patient effort, they had reached a kind of understanding. Later that day, Emily attended a ceremony marking the 10th anniversary of what was now called the transition. The Great Hall was filled with representatives of every surviving species. At the front stood Admiral Reed, now Ambassador Reed, and beside him, Director Trull, one of the few Vorn who had embraced the new reality. 10 years ago, Reed addressed the gathering. "We faced what seemed like the end of all things. Today, we celebrate not just survival, but a new beginning." Emily looked around the room. The change was remarkable. The rigid hierarchy that had defined the Union for millennia had dissolved. The species that had once dominated through technological superiority had been forced to adapt, to learn new ways of existing. And those who had been dismissed as primitive, like humans, had become teachers and guides. After the ceremony, Emily found herself walking with Trell through gardens that edged against the void boundary. Plants from 100 worlds grew here, gradually adapting to the changing conditions. "I still remember the day we first met your species," Trell said. His once rigid body now moved with a slight limp, a reminder of a narrow escape from his homeworld's evacuation. "We thought you were so weak, so far beneath us." "You weren't entirely wrong," Emily replied. "Physically, we are weaker than many species. Our technology was less advanced. But strength takes many forms." Trell nodded slowly. "Your people knew how to adapt, how to survive with limited resources. You understood cooperation in ways we had forgotten. In our pursuit of perfect technology, we lost the ability to function without it." They stopped at the edge of the garden, where normal space blended into the transition zone. Beyond, the void shimmered with its alien beauty. "What do you think will happen now?" Trell asked. "Will the void continue to spread until it consumes everything?" Emily shook her head. "Not consume, transform. And no, our latest data suggests it's stabilizing. The two states of reality seem to be reaching a balance, like ecosystems finding equilibrium. And we will continue to exist in both," Trell mused. "Neither fully in one reality nor the other." "Isn't that what life has always been?" Emily smiled. "Adapting to changing conditions, finding ways to thrive in transitions." As they watched, a group of children ran past, human, Vorn, and a dozen other species playing together. These children had grown up in the new reality without the old prejudices and hierarchies. To them, the galaxy's transformation was not an apocalypse, but simply the world as it was. Later that evening, Reed joined Emily on an observation platform overlooking the boundary zone. The stars above looked different now, their light bent and shifted by the nearby void. "Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if they had taken us seriously from the beginning," Reed said. "If they had listened when we first suggested the void couldn't be fought." Emily was quiet for a moment. Maybe this was the only way it could happen. Some lessons can only be learned through experience. Reed nodded. The galaxy labeled us weak, but maybe what they saw as weakness was exactly what the universe needed. Below them, the settlement lights came on as night fell, a constellation of human ingenuity and alien adaptation, a new civilization built not on technological dominance, but on resilience and cooperation. Against the darkness of space and the swirling mystery of the void, it glowed with hope and possibility, proof that endings could also be beginnings if you were willing to change.